In this video, we would be discussing a very epic battle between Ding Liren versus Hikaru Nakamura from the Norway Chess 2024, and we have the round number 5 on our board. The game is already extremely interesting, and if Nakamura wins this game, he will simply cross 2800 FIDE rating in the classical format. So this video is going to be very epic and the game is also very interesting, so I don't want to waste any further time, so let's start. So Ding is playing with the white pieces, not in a very good form, and he starts the game with 1d4. Nakamura plays d5, c4, and after c4, generally speaking, black plays c6 or even e6 is fine, or if black wants to simply go for the queen's gambit accepted variation, he can even go for capturing the pawn. But instead, at the place of going all the three options, Nakamura played a very interesting move, which is c5. And this is also known as the Queen's Gambit Decline Austrian variation. After c5, now white is having two major options. He can either go for capturing the pawn on d5 or even go for capturing the pawn on c5. So if white simply goes for capturing the c5 pawn, black's idea is to simply push the pawn, and for example after knight f3, knight c6, e5 and capturing the c5 pawn is the basic idea that black is going for. So at the place of c5, capturing the c5, white went for capturing the d5 pawn, and now we have knight to f6, not directly capturing the pawn, because if you go for it, knight c3, and it will simply help white to develop his pieces, or even e3 protecting the pawn is fine. So first we have knight f6, and now we have knight c3 by Ding. If he goes for capturing the c5 pawn as well, now black is going to simply chop off the pawn on d5, takes, and it looks like white is a simply happy pawn up, but the fact here is black is going to play e6, knight a6 or even knight d7, capturing the c5 pawn with ease, and the position would be equal. Because you can't really play b4 defending the pawn because the knight is simply covering the b4 square. So going back, c5 is not really possible, so we have knight to c3, takes, and now we have knight to f3. If white goes for capturing the c5 pawn now, after takes, let's say white goes for queen trade and takes, in this position definitely black castle has been broken, but this position is extremely fine for black because white is definitely a pawn up, but these pawns on c5 and c3 are simply an isolated pawn and simply going to collapse in the future. So that's why it's not a great idea. So at the place of capturing the c5 pawn, first we have knight to f3, and now finally Nakamura chops off the pawn on d4. Taking with the queen, takes, and now we have queen into c3. If white goes for trading off the queen and takes, this position is still fine for black. Definitely black castle has been broken, but as I said, the pawn on c3 is weak. Black can happily play something like bishop f5, e6, developing the bishop, knight c6, putting the king to c7 maybe, and the position is extremely solid for black. So that's why it's not really working. So Ding wants to have an edge as he is playing with the white pieces, so he took the knight with the queen. Knight to c6, e4, a6, and now we have the move bishop to e2. After the game, Nakamura said that bishop e2 not the best, the usual way to play in this position is to play a3, and the idea is pretty interesting. Black can't really play e5 because after takes, black is not really having this bishop b4 attacking the queen. Whereas in the game we had bishop e2, and Nakamura consumed around I would say around 25 minutes, and he went for the move e5, which is very interesting. And the whole point here is you can't really take the pawn because after bishop b4, as there is no a3, the queen is simply hanging and black is completely winning. So that's why e5 is a good move in this position, and somehow black simply equalizes in this spot. After e5, now finally Ding plays a3, covering the b4 square from the bishop to g4 now, short castle, and now as black has already achieved e5, now black's play is pretty simple. First Nakamura went get the rook into the game, and now the idea is already to play knight to d4, attacking the queen and also putting the pressure on the bishop and the knight. So first we have queen b3, and now already knight to a5 by Nakamura, a good move, attacking the queen and also protecting the pawn. So check, and now b5, again a good move, queen d1. So you can already realize how many moves white has already wasted queen b3, queen a4, queen d1. And this gave black plenty of time to just trade off the queens, equalize the position. Even we can say that black is even slightly better. Knight to b3 attacking the rook, rook b1, and now bishop to c5. Definitely black can go for chopping off the bishop and just enjoy the bishop pair, which is definitely not a bad idea. But first developing all his pieces. And now we have king f1. If white plays something like h3, black is already having a very interesting idea up his sleeve, which is to first capture the knight and now bishop to d4. And the idea is to simply chop off the bishop followed by capturing the pawn on b2 in the future. But first we have king f1, and now the idea of white is to simply chop off the pawn on e5 as the bishop on e2 is already protected. So now we have the move f6 by Nakamura protecting the e5 pawn, and now we have the move rook to d3 attacking the knight. And here a very interesting part here is after in the game we had bishop to e6. Like just assume the king would have been on g1. Now black is already having a very interesting idea to capture the bishop. Takes, and now bishop into f2 would have been in the air as it would have been a check and capturing the rook. So yeah, this was the whole idea of playing king f1 in this position, I believe. Rook d3, bishop e6, going back with the bishop, knight d2, knight to d4, b4, bishop b6, bishop b2. And now we can already sense that white is somehow untangling his position, his pieces, and getting the comfortable position. So at this particular point, Nakamura took the bishop on e2, and now he's finally enjoying the bishop pair. So king to e7 now, f3. So king e7, a very interesting move as the queens have been traded. It's better to keep the king in the center because always in the end game you must use your king, activate your king, and have a good position. So f3 now having a symmetrical position. Rook to c2 activating the rook. At the place of rook c2, there was a very interesting idea. You can try to pause the video and try to find the best idea for the black in this position. Okay, so this idea was missed by Nakamura. The idea was very interesting, was to play g5. And the whole point here is, for example, rook c3, just trade off the rook and just go with the move g4. And now black's idea is not to play on the queen side, but to play on the king side. So after g4, obviously if you try to capture the pawn on g4, you simply ruin up your pawn structure. So I believe maybe something like rook c1, now already takes and rook g8. And the whole point in this position here is, as the g1 square is covered up, that's the whole reason black can actually play on the king side. And black is already having a very good position, like you can say black is kind of winning. So g5 would have been the best, but we have rook c2 playing on the queen side. Takes, and here we have rook c3 trying to trade off the rooks, bishop to c4 check, king e1, and already bishop f2 check, a very interesting move. If you chop off the bishop, take, and now the rook is already very powerful on the second rank. So that's why at the place of capturing the bishop, we have first king d1, and now Nakamura is kind of forced to trade off the rooks, rook to d8, rook to a1, and I can already realize the position that what is the real power of the bishop pair. The bishop pair are completely dominating the position, and definitely white is having all his pieces extremely passively placed. And you can already say that the position is already better for black. But the whole point is, the whole point here is how will you really convert the position, because you are always having a better position, but the hardest part in any game of chess here is to convert a better position into a winning game. So first we have bishop f1 attacking the g2 pawn. You can't really capture the bishop because the knight is pinned. So g3, and now bishop to e3. a4 just takes, bishop to b5, and now rook to d3 activating the rook. And now the idea is already to capture the knight followed by capturing the pawn. And you can't really defend it, so we have rook c1. And now first, before going for this variation, it would have been fine, but I guess giving maybe white some counterplay. But still black is better. But first Nakamura decided to first push h5, and now he went for the same variation, and now black is already a pawn up. Definitely you can say it's a opposite bishop pair, so maybe drawing chances, but yeah, black position is extremely well placed, whereas white is completely passive. That's why black is actually having a very good chances of winning the game. So we have first bishop c6 now, putting pressure on the isolated pawn, rook to e3, and now we have rook to f2. Obviously, if you try to go for this trade, you can still say that maybe black be able to win this because black is already 2 pawns up, but it's hard as the rooks have been traded and black is already only having the opposite color bishop. So definitely it decreases the chances of winning the game. So first we have rook to f2, putting pressure on the h2 pawn now, h4, check, king activating the king, activating the rook, attacking the pawn, and now slowly improving the position. A couple of moves were played, bishop d2, bishop e2, just maneuvering the pieces, Nakamura trying to find some ideas, and now we have finally g5. Obviously you would play on the king side as you are having majority on the king side, so it makes sense, push the pawns and make a pass pawn. g5. And here we have the move bishop to d2. If you takes and play something like bishop g2, pawn push is already very strong. If you take, black is having a pass pawn, and even if you try to capture the g5 pawn, black is not really going to capture the pawn but simply push the pawn, and you can't really stop the pawn and black is winning. So that's why we first had bishop d2, but takes, and now Nakamura has already created 2 weaknesses. Actually all the 3 weaknesses are present in the position, but simply check, and now we have king f3, king c3. If you try to play king e3, saying that the rook is not really having any square, so the rook has to move and the bishop will be captured. But after king to e3, simply rook to f4, and now the whole point here is the king is actually not really having any good square to move so that the bishop can attack the rook. So now black is simply going to move the bishop and capture the pawn. So that's why we first have king c3, and now simply bishop to e2, bishop to e3, rook to h2, bishop to c5, and now bishop to b5. And after bishop b5, white is going to lose another pawn, and black would be having 2 pass pawn with a completely dominating position. So that's why after bishop to b5, on the move number 54, Ding Liren with the white pieces decided to resign the game. And now Hikaru Nakamura successfully, after beating Ding Liren, has crossed 2800 classical rating, which is an extremely big achievement for Hikaru Nakamura. After the round number 5, Nakamura is leading the tournament. In the round number 5, all the 3 games were pretty interesting. Carlsen managed to beat Alireza Firouzja in a completely drawing rook endgame, and I'm definitely going to make a video on it. The endgame was very instructive, and at the same time, Pragnanda was able to beat Caruana Fabiano in the knight endgame, which was again a very interesting way to play. So definitely I'm going to also come up with that particular video. So guys, that's it for today. If you learned anything new from this game, like I personally learned something new, like the opening that Nakamura played was very interesting. Like you can also play some unorthodox opening which are not very well prepared by your opponent. Definitely if your opponent is well prepared, then it's a bad idea. But many times such openings, such sidelines are not really well prepared by your opponent. That can really give you some high advantage in the practical chances. So yeah, that's it for today. So if you learned anything new today, make sure to like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you soon, so till then stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess.